I've always thought of Max as the quintessential Quaker, and that's exactly what Mark said this morning. We were both thinking the same thing. Not only because of the beard, but Max was born on a farm in the Quaker belt of central Indiana. The third generation descended from anti-slavery Quakers. He's a recorded Friends minister with a PhD in American religious history and an activist for peace and justice, and the author of many books and articles on Quaker history, on spirituality, and on peacemaking. He's a retired professor of Quaker Studies and former director of the Friends Center at Guilford College in Greensboro, North Carolina. That position now held by our friend Wes Daniels. Max co-leads with his wife Jane annual service learning trips to Palestine and Israel in support of the Ramallah Friends School and to do peace and justice work in the region. Max's latest book is called Palestine and Israel, Understanding Encounters, published by Barclay Press, a topic he'll be speaking on this morning, which couldn't be more relevant to current events, both in the Middle East and in our own political climate. Max resides in Greensboro, North Carolina with his wife Jane and their dog Yaha. Yaha sounds like my favorite town in Oregon, Yahats. He's also a member of New Garden Friends Meeting. He has 3 children and 7 grandchildren, and I just heard he's going to be celebrating a grandchild's birthday tomorrow. And just as a personal side note, Max and I share a deep interest in the holiness movement in Quakerism because he grew up in that movement in Indiana, so is an insider to that tradition of Quakerism. And I've studied it as a historian, but as an outsider to the tradition. And we both share a strong admiration for and have been inspired by the Quaker writer Thomas Kelly, who also grew up in that tradition. So for all of Max's scholarly credentials, he is probably best known in the Quaker world as a master storyteller and has a wonderful sense of humor, as you will get to experience this morning as he shares with us the story of Naboth's Vineyard 2025 edition. Max, take it away.
Thanks so much. After that eulogy, maybe we should just go out to the cemetery for the burial. Thank you very much, Carol. Indeed, did grow up in that holiness tradition. We can compare notes on the long lists of thou shalt nots that some of us grew up with. But thank you very much. Thank you all who have gathered when you could be beating the Baptists to the restaurants after worship. And I hope that the hour or so ahead of us will be a good one as we interact with each other. And I hope there'll be a lot of discussion about current events in Israel and Palestine and some of our experiences there. In fact, had this Zoom gone on when it was first scheduled, I think 2 weeks from now, my wife, Jane, would have been able to participate. But she is in Ramallah right now with the Friends United Meeting Pastoral Care Team visiting the Ramallah Friends School, and tomorrow heading off to Lebanon to support the Brahmana Friends School just up the mountain from Beirut. Be holding them in the light, seriously. It's a very dicey time over there. My wife Facebook messaged me this morning that she was in Jerusalem with the FUM team for the Palm Sunday processions. And she showed me the video of all the priests heading into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I suffered severe beard envy. But then they climbed up the Mount of Olives for the traditional procession of the triumphal entry of Palm Sunday. But as they were leaving that, the sirens went off, and 2 Houthi missiles from Yemen exploded overhead as the Iron Dome intercepted them. So this is kind of real. and we'll share a little bit about the current tensions there. But anyway, thank you very much for gathering. And as Carol did say, my almost 8-year-old grandson will be storming in here right around 3 o'clock to see Papa. So there'll be kind of a hard stop around that time. But I hope we get a lot accomplished by then. So I chose Naboth's Vineyard from 1 Kings 21 to introduce our conversation today, because there is indeed a 2025 equivalent of it. If you're familiar with Naboth's Vineyard, and you folk are out there at Reedwood Friends and connected with that gathering of friends, and so I assume you actually read your Bible, unlike many of the students I had out of the various traditions that didn't read the Bible as much. But if you remember Naboth's Vineyard, you've got this absolutely innocent farmer tilling his soil and enjoying his ancestral vineyard, but has the unfortunate reality of living close to the palace of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. And he wants that vineyard, offers money for it, but Naboth said, it's been in my family for generations. I hope to hand it off for generationally. This is very much the way people in that part of the world live. That's their capital, the land that they have, and they're deeply rooted. This is why the olive tree is such an important symbol, to be deeply rooted in very hostile circumstances, rocky, arid soil. So he won't sell it. So Ahab gets very depressed. Jezebel asks him why he's so depressed. Naboth won't give me his orchard, his vineyard. So Jezebel says, relax, I'll take care of it. And you know the story. Sets him up, calls a banquet, pays 2 scoundrels off to say bad things about Naboth, that he's cursed the king and God, and they take him outside and kill him. And Ahab gets the vineyard. Well, this is very, very similar, thank goodness, minus the killing so far, of our friends, the Nasser family, at a place that some of you know of, called the Tent of Nations. It got that name as they tried to figure out a way to save their land from the threats of it. I don't know if the techie person has the map that I sent to Mark to put up so I can locate the Nasser farm for you, but if that comes up, I'll point it out. But the Nasser farm, there it is, thank you. Kind of hard to see, but down at the very bottom of the map on the left, you see Bethlehem and you see Beit Jala, 2 Christian Palestinian towns in the West Bank, just south of Jerusalem. And the farm we're talking about is just south of that, in this area that is part of what we call the Gush Etzion block of Israeli settlements. This is Jerusalem, if you can see it there. Ramallah's up in here. And all of these splotches indicate the various settlements and Palestinian villages, Israeli settlements, and different categorizations of areas A, B, and C that we'll talk about soon. So anyway, that's where we're going to be talking about. 100-acre Palestinian farm in the hilly central highlands of the West Bank, just south of Jerusalem, maybe 9 or 10 miles south of Jerusalem. So the Nassers have this 100-acre farm that they actually own, which is unusual, dating back to 1915, when Daher Nasser, a nomadic sheep herder, registered his land with the Ottoman Turks, who controlled the area at that time. Unusual because then you have to pay taxes. But he registered it, And the papers still reside with now the fourth generation of the Nasser family. But they are in an area called Area C in the West Bank, which comes from a designation in the early 1990s from the Oslo Peace Accords, when an accord, not really a peace accord, but an accord was signed between Israel and the PLO that created the Palestinian National Authority and divided the West Bank, the Palestinian West Bank, into three areas. Area A, maybe 10 or 12% of the West Bank, that was under the control of the new Palestinian National Authority. Area B, another 15 to 20% of the West Bank, that was under the control of the Palestinian National Authority for education, garbage collection, health and human services, but under Israel's security control. So still under Israel's total control. And Area C, 61% of the entire West Bank, that was completely under Israel's control. This was meant to be a 5-year interim period during which final status agreements were to be worked out. Water, refugees, the status of Jerusalem, leading to a Palestinian state in the West Bank, which the PLO in 1988 had said they would accept, recognizing Israel on the 78% of British Mandate Palestine that they occupied from the 1948 war and on. And in return, they would have a Palestinian state on the remaining 22%, the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Well, that never happened for a whole variety of reasons, not the least of which was Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to run for prime minister on a platform of destroying Oslo. And it didn't help that when Yitzhak Rabin, prime minister of Israel, signed that accord, shortly thereafter, he was assassinated by an Israeli who opposed that in 1994. So what we're left with is still that interim agreement. And in the meantime, in Area C, that 61% of the West Bank, Israel has started building settlements, starting in around 1979 and escalating tremendously under Benjamin Netanyahu and Ariel Sharon and succeeding Likud party leadership. I mention that because the Nasser farm that they own is in Area C, and it's surrounded by 5 of these Israeli settlements. And when you think of settlements, sometimes people think of kind of windswept house trailers on an isolated hilltop or a kind of a frontier village in the American Old West. The 2 closest settlements right on the border of the Nasser farm have 55,000 people in them. At least Beitar Elite does. Nevi Daniel is approaching that, and they're expanding tremendously. It's a real threat, not only to their land, but also to their own well-being. Over the years that we visited this farm and become acquainted with the Nassers, we've watched these settlements expand, bouncing from hilltop to hilltop until they literally cover several miles. And last summer, when we visited the farm, and we do this every year on our Friends United Meeting Service learning trips, and Jane was just there 2 days ago with the FUM Pastoral Care Team, and I'll share a bit of what she saw 2 days ago in a moment. But what we have witnessed over the years that we've been going there since 2010 annually is that the road by their farm that connects them with their markets and with Bethlehem, just a few miles away, and their church. These are Lutherans. They are members of the Christmas Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. That road has been cut off. They have no access to that road that connects them to Bethlehem the easiest way. They could be in Bethlehem in 10 minutes. Instead, they have to take about an hour and a half through back roads, through the bad roads, through Arab villages to get to their farm. They have had all utilities cut off. They have no water or electricity. They have to collect rainwater, and that's illegal for Palestinians in Area C. So they have to do it surreptitiously. They have solar for their power, but they have to have that on wheels so they can roll it into hiding, because that's illegal. They have demolition orders on every structure above ground. It's a farm, and these demolition orders are on their fences, their structures above ground. They live in the caves that their ancestors first lived in when they claimed that land and registered in 1915. They have had 25,000 of their vines destroyed, either by cutting them up or burning them. Last summer, before we went, settlers had come in and stolen all of their grapes weeks before harvest, just to deprive them of any possible harvest. They've had thousands of their trees cut down. They've been physically assaulted. And on some of our work trips, we have dug the holes to replace them. One of the most moving of those was replacing the vines that had just recently been destroyed by planting vines that a Jewish Israeli organization had purchased from a Muslim nursery to plant on this Christian farm planted by Quakers. So if you get a sense of the similarity to Naboth, the only thing that's missing is, two things. They haven't been killed yet, although they've been physically assaulted and put in the hospital. But it's that check that King Ahab offered. He offered Naboth to buy it. But Naboth said, no, I mean, this is my inheritance. We've been here generationally. I can't do that. Well, just a few years ago, one of the settlers offered them a blank check. Fill in any amount you want, and we'll buy the farm. And the master said, no, same as Naboth. This is our land. We are rooted here. It's important to us. We want to keep it in the family for generations. It's part of our sumud, the Arabic word for steadfastness. So that's the situation. In 2025, we really have this parallel with Naboth's vineyard of 3,000 years ago. And there are certain lessons to be learned from this that I think are important. One is the unyielding power that some can exercise on others' lives and livelihood. And we certainly see this with the Nassers. They own this land. They have the papers to prove it. But Israel will not re-register their land, which has to be done on a regular basis, because they want that land. And if they re-register it, they essentially say in perpetuity, nope, that's yours. Our hands have to be off. So for 20 to 30 years now, they've gone to Israeli courts to the tune of more than $300,000 over the years to prove that they own that land. And the courts keep kicking the can down the road, saying, well, we need more evidence. We can't make a decision now. Clearly, it's the delaying tactic, hoping that they wear them down, that they'll eventually leave, and they can get that land. It's very sad to see power wielded that way unjustly. But in the face of that, is the inspiring steadfastness, samud, of the Nasser family and their Christian commitment to non-violently resisting these threats to their land. On a stone in 4 languages at the entrance to their farm is this statement, "We refuse to be enemies." They've invited settlers to come and experience their life. And quite often, these settlers will come and say, "You have no power, you have no water." We have all of that. Water through our pipes 24/7. Nonstop electricity and internet. We can see you from our front porch. But you don't have that? And it's eye-opening. But that's an indication of how separate these populations are. Although you can see each other from your front porch, there is no understanding of the other, which enables the stereotypes to emerge that help you other a person, turn them into an other. And we see the results of that certainly in Gaza. And the Nassers maintain this Christian understanding of nonviolence. When we ask them how they can do this, they say, well, that's what Jesus taught us. And last summer, Daoud Nasser, I don't know if Mark sent out the link to the New York Times article that featured Daoud Nasser and the 10 of Nations just this past week. Daoud shared with us last summer his understanding of Jesus' teachings about turning the other cheek. And if you're familiar with Walter Wink, he cited Walter Wink's understanding of that cultural significance of turning the other cheek. One of those places where you have to take the Bible literally because it's told in Jesus' story, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn your left one. And the way Walter Wink describes that, and that Daoud shared, was in that culture back then, and still today, there are only 2 ways that you can, strike someone on their right cheek. A backhanded slap with your right hand, which, dismissive, you're less than I am, you don't deserve my treating you as an equal, or a full roundhouse with your left hand, which is your dirty hand in that culture. You do your dirty deeds with that. So again, dismissing the person with a backhand slap or demeaning the person with your dirty hand. And Jesus says, turn your left cheek. Force them to come at you with their right hand. Refuse to be demeaned or dismissed. And in that moment, when you don't respond the way you're expected to, you've got the brief advantage. But it's a statement of, I will not be othered. I will not be treated as less than. And that's how this Christian family understands, their place. They are threatened in ways that would buckle most of our knees. There probably is very little hope that they will ever succeed in the Israeli courts. There's every reason to believe that they will eventually lose their land. 2 days ago, when my wife Jane was visiting the farm with this FUM delegation, they saw what we saw last summer on our visit, only more so. The construction trailers for the expansion of Nevi Daniel, one of the settlements closest to the farm, were right up against the fence. And when Jane was thinking about going down to take some pictures, Daoud said, you can't go past the composting toilets. They're close to the border. If you get too close to the fence, the settlers will come streaming down and we'll all be in trouble. Last summer, they had a bulldozer cutting a road through the Nassers' land to construct more of the settlement. And there was nothing they could do about it. These caravans with the construction supplies that are right up against their fence bordering their farm are put there by Palestinian workers. You think of Egypt, it's Passover season. Think of the enslavement in Egypt, building stuff for the Pharaoh. Palestinians desperate for employment, desperate, to earn a living, can get work permits from Israel if they come in and build their own prison, build these settlements that are claiming Palestinian land. And there's nothing to stop them. Israel is not interested in stopping it. They have the most extreme settler-controlled government in their history. And the United States isn't interested in stopping it. Our Congress just confirmed Mike Huckabee to be ambassador to Israel, who believes that there is no such thing as a Palestinian, and the temple needs to be rebuilt, necessitating total Israeli control of the West Bank and of Jerusalem and of the site where the temple would be built, the third most holy site in all of Islam, the Dome of the Rock and Aqsa Mosque. So it doesn't look good. Not for the Nassers, not for justice, not for the Israelis and Palestinians who are working so hard to bring about a just peace. But in the face of that, our friends over there, both Israelis and Palestinians, are practicing this steadfastness, practicing this symbolic place of the olive tree in their culture, deeply rooted, unmovable, even in rocky, arid soil. And they maintain long hope, something else we can learn from them. They often tell us we may not see justice or peace in our lifetime or our children's lifetimes, but we maintain long hope, kind of what Martin Luther King Jr. said about the arc of the universe bending towards justice. And in our own Quaker history, we can take lessons from the fact that just before we went on this official Zoom call, we're talking about Anthony Benezet and Benjamin Lay and the anti-slavery movement. Anthony Benezet and Benjamin Lay did not live to see the end of slavery. Many of the Quakers who worked against slavery, and they were a minority quite often, using abolitionism or the Underground Railroad in the face of more conservative elements within Quakerism, did not live to see the end of their efforts, the fruition of their efforts. And our friends over there understand that as well. But they maintain faithfulness, they maintain samud, they maintain that long hope. So let me end there and see what questions you have, what comments you have. Maybe some of you have visited there or read that article in the New York Times about the Christians in Palestine feeling like American Christians have abandoned them. And, that's a topic for some conversation as well. When I first went over to teach in the Ramallah Friends School in 1970, it was estimated that between 17 and 20% of the Palestinian population were Christians. It's less than 1% now. And it's not because of animosity between the Muslims and the Christians. There isn't. You see it with your own eyes. The holiday parades, the Muslim Boy Scout troops and the Christian Boy Scout troops and Girl Scout troops march together, celebrating each other's holidays. It's because when the economic or political situation deteriorates, becomes so dangerous, Christians have an easier way out. They're more highly educated because of all these mission schools. We've just talked about the evangelical school that, one of the viewers here today has a family connection to. The Quaker schools, the Lutheran schools. Palestinians are among the most highly educated people in the world. And much of that through these missionary schools, through Christians. And so Christians, highly educated, with more ties to the West they sound more like us than Muslims, are more welcome. And they leave when others can't. So the population's gone from about 20% to less than 1%. And the Christian church there worries that the church that began there will soon disappear, and all will be left will be the dead stones of old churches. And they often complain to us when we come that why is it that American Christians and other Christians come here to visit the dead stones of these churches and bypass and ignore the living stones of the Christian community here? So anyway, let me pause there, see what questions you have, comments you have. Feel free to unmute yourselves and ask directly, or if you feel more comfortable putting something in the chat, do that. But however, Carol, you want to moderate this, or Mark, have at it.
Thank you, Max. Yeah, this is Mark, and we do have some questions percolating here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it on here to your old friend, Paul Anderson. Here he is.
Oh,
Just wanting to say, well, Max.
well, Paul.
The way Elton Trueblood used to say hello. Well, Max, hey, thank you for the update. This is stuff that is not in the news, it's not in the media that I'm aware of. And part of my question is, how can we get it out there? Are there Christian groups like the World Council of Churches or the National Council of Churches or the Lutheran groups that are making this known to the wider world? Because it really does deserve attention.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. And well, Paul, someday I hope you find a fine position at a fine Quaker liberal arts college. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Indeed, there are some wonderful groups that are working on this. Friends of Sabil is a very important one. Sabil in Arabic is the path down to the spring. It was started by Episcopalians, Anglicans, and in fact, Gene Zaru, our own Quaker former clerk of the Ramallah Friends meeting, was on the founding board of Sabil. It is the Palestinian Christian Liberation Theology Center in Jerusalem, and they do wonderful work. They also have annual tours that they sponsor. Another organization is Pilgrims of Ibilin. Ibilin, Ibilin, is a Muslim Christian mixed village in the Galilee, just outside of Haifa. And it is the city where Elias Shakur's school, the Mar Elias School, is located. Some of you, I know Abuna Elias has visited George Fox. I know has he been to Reedwood? Has he spoken at Reedwood? Elias Shakur is the author of Blood Brothers, We Belong to the Land, a Melkite priest who's the emeritus archbishop of the Galilee. Big stuff. We visit him each summer with our service learning trip. And he's established this school in a little village of Ibilin for Jews, Christians, Muslims, and Druze, working on reconciliation. And the Pilgrims of Ibilin is the North American support group for that. They do tours as well and have a regular newsletter. The American Friends Service Committee is doing a lot of work there. The Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Mennonites, all also work hard there. And there are wonderful Israeli organizations that are doing important work. I recommend looking at the Breaking the Silence group. We tour Hebron with them each summer. These are Israeli soldiers who did their required military service, often in the occupied territories or in Gaza, and coming out of their experience recognized this is not the way to provide Israel security. This is doing the exact opposite. Our occupation is creating the anger and the resentment that breeds terrorism. And they work to end the occupation and bring about what they see is the only hope for a resolution, and that is to end the occupation, give equal rights to everyone between the river and the sea, and live together. Breaking the Silence, an amazing organization. And then there's a wonderful North American support group, for the Tent of Nations, Friends of the Tent of Nations. So yes, Paul, there are quite a few groups, and encourage people to either look at their websites, sign up for their newsletters, and indeed, support those groups that are doing the hard work over there of finding a better way. Other questions? While we're waiting for the next one, I just want to mention something very quickly. Oh, got one? Okay. Got a question? No. Well, while the next one is percolating, I just want to mention something. Just before the group today left Jerusalem from the Palm Sunday procession to go back to Ramallah, the Houthis sent 2 missiles from Yemen. They heard the sirens, and they heard the explosions as the Iron Dome intercepted them. So be thinking of them. Okay. Yeah, next question.
Is there anyone online that had a question? I wanted to make sure that we were kind of including any online audience as well. So, yeah, Dwight Kimberly.
Thank you, Max, for giving us an update on that area. It seems to me that, from my very naive point of view, that part of the answer, maybe a major part of the answer, is here in the United States, because without the money that we spend to support Israel, without that money, there would have to be more concessions, and I forget how much we spend over there. As I remember, $4 billion.
Yeah, $4 billion annually.
Yeah, if that money started drying up, and we said something like that we need to have a solution to this problem, things would happen. Is that kind of naive to have that position?
You're spot on. I'll give you a couple examples of that. Last summer, when we toured Hebron with the Breaking the Silence soldiers, these were 3 soldiers who were now in the reserves. They had done their 3 years of required military service. They said, when we were in the service, our uniforms were made in the USA, our weapons were made in the USA, the bombs we are dropping right now in Gaza were made in the USA. If you stopped funding this, it would be a very important step. Now, Israel has its own arms industry, but not to the extent that we're supplying. I remember when I was teaching in Ramallah, this is back in 1970, it was my alternative service as a conscious objector in the Vietnam War. My students, as many of you can name the car that's driving down the road by the sound of the engine. Some of you are that kind of aficionados. Well, they knew the sounds of the airplanes that flew overhead. And jet would fly over the school and say, "That's a French-made Mirage." Another one would fly over and said, "That's an Israeli-made Kafir." Roar of another engine, and they'd look at me and say, "Mr. Carter, that's one of yours." Phantoms. We've supplied for a long, long time. Indeed, as part of our agreements, $3.8 to $4 billion annually of military aid. And another example of that, several years ago, we were in Ramallah for our service learning trip, and there'd been an Israeli incursion the night before, and our program coordinator, Mohammed Salim, said, "I want to take you over to my cousin's house to see what happened." So we walked about 2 or 3 miles from the school into a residential area of Ramallah, no military importance at all. But Israel had come in the night before and had blown a hole through the grocery store. Several houses were torched, quite a bit of damage. And as we approached the house of his cousin, we saw, the tattered curtains flying out of these empty windows, glass on the ground, pockmarked limestone. And Nadia, his 27-year-old cousin, came screaming out, seeing us as a group of Americans, saying, "And you call us the terrorists? You call us the terrorists?" And she described the night before as the incursion came in middle of the night, and she and her husband and their 3 children under the age of 5 huddled on the floor of their bedroom together, assuming they'd be killed as bullets ricocheted around their house for about a half an hour. And they survived, and as they were sweeping out the debris, they recognized all the empty shell cases were made in the USA. "And you call us the terrorists?" And then she served us cold drinks and apologized for not being able to serve us anything. "Oh, that's just Palestinian hospitality." Well, we were shaken by that. And what can we do? How can we respond? And we'd just earlier that day heard a person describe how every man, woman, and child in the United States, on average, gives $25 annually to support Israel's military. And we said, okay, that's what we got to do. And I passed the hat, which Quakers come equipped with. And people who could gave $25 or more or whatever they could. And we sent back with Muhammad to his cousin to help them start rebuilding. Didn't hear anything in response for several days and wondered if it had been taken wrong, if it was seen as blood money. But on our last night, we were at Muhammad's house getting ready to leave the next day. And the phone rang, and it was Nadia saying, "Are the Americans there?" And Muhammad says, "Yes." "Well, I want to come over." She came over to introduce us to her husband and her children, and just casually talking about, parenting and child raising and just mundane stuff. And then she stopped and looked at me and said, "Are Quakers Christians?" Now, this is a conservative Muslim. My wife elbowed me in the ribs and said, "Just say yes." Because she knows I had a whole semester of Quaker theology to talk about how some people wonder. And I said, yes. He said, "Well, I thought so, but I didn't want to offend." And this Muslim woman, who had just about been killed with her family a few days before by American-made weaponry, reached into a bag and handed us all Christian tokens, olive wood crosses, things like that, to express her thanks. I just tell that story both to share, we're funding this in large part. And if we stopped funding it, it would make a major, major statement. And to give you some sense of the other that we tend to, in the United States, sadly see as, the other. We deport them. We arrest them for having different beliefs and remove their student visas, are capable of handing out Christian artifacts. I mean, it's just an important thing to understand. And I'll say this too, in probably response to the unspoken question thus far is, what's the hope? Is there any alternative to this? And sadly, I have to say, in the short term, no. We've seen that no one in Congress, with the exception of a handful, are willing to buck the powerful lobbies behind this funding. And it's not necessarily the Jewish lobbies or the pro-Israel lobbies. It's Christian lobbies, Christian nationalist lobbies that fund millions of dollars. So we don't see any short-term hope right now of changing that arc. But there are groups working hard for an alternative. And we know some of these folk. They're working together, Israeli and Palestinian, right now, philosophers. You could say, well, we're paid to think. We don't necessarily have to know exactly how to put this in motion. But here's an idea, and it's gaining some traction in some circles. It's, one homeland, two nations. I just heard this from, a Jewish American 2 weeks ago who was talking with a group that I was in. This is workable. We can look at Switzerland and some other models, but it would be something like this. Wherever you live in British Mandate Palestine, what is now the occupied West Bank in Israel, you can be an Israeli settler, you can be, you live in Tel Aviv or Haifa, and you can be a citizen of a Jewish state and stay put where you are. If you're a Palestinian Arab, Christian or Muslim or Baha'i or whatever, you can live wherever in present-day Israel or in the West Bank and be the citizen of a Palestinian Arab state. And that's one of the possible solutions, so that everyone between the river and the sea would have equal rights, self-determination, human dignity, and citizenship in their own kind of ethnic group. We're a long way from realizing that, but that's one of those possibilities that's out there. But as our Israeli soldier friends told us last summer, that really there are only three options. Annihilate the other, totally crush the other and eliminate them, live in constant apartheid, where one group dominates the other, kind of like South Africa, and have constant turmoil and fighting, or equal rights for everyone between the river and the sea. So those are your only three options. So anyway, other questions, comments?
Yeah, Max, could you give us an update on the Ramallah School? I heard that they had some building project that was going on and the funding was canceled. Is that true?
Yes. Yes. The schools are actually doing remarkably well under the circumstances. There are 1,600 students at the Ramallah Friends School, now pre-K through 12. They're now international baccalaureate all the way through. They are the best schools in the region, bar none. They have about 115 graduates each year. Every one of them goes off to the finest colleges and universities in the world. Those who can't get into Guilford will go to Harvard, Yale, MIT. But yeah, they're amazing schools. Now, the problem is the economics and the political situation. It's about 40% unemployment in the Palestinian West Bank right now. That was bad even before October 7. Got even worse after October 7 when 150,000 Palestinians lost their work permits. Now with the cancellation of U.S. aid and UNRWA funding, more people have lost their jobs. And the school has seen 36 students pulled out and with their parents go to the States because they don't see a future there, or they've lost employment and they can't stay in Ramallah. We're hosting one right here in Greensboro, whose parents said, especially for young Palestinian males, they're targets on their backs. And they've seen what's happened to their fellow classmates like Shadi Khoury there, who are arrested for no crime and thrown in prison just to send a message. And we have one student here at the New Garden Friends School because his parents said, we got to get him out of here. And we raised the funds to get him here. So that's a challenge. The army, the Israeli army and settlers come in every day, not to the school grounds. They're a little shy about, messing up an American school. but they're not shy about torching the vegetable market right next to the school, which they did last year, 2 weeks before we went on our service learning trip, or 2 years ago when they came in the night we arrived and blew up an apartment building a mile away. So those incursions are happening all the time. And my wife told me in one of her messages this week that everyone they're talking to says they anticipate that after they're done with whatever they're doing in Gaza and what they're doing in the northern West Bank in Tulkarm, Jenin, Nablus, Tubas, and the refugee camps, which they're tearing up, and it's a process of what they call Gazification, that they will turn to places like Ramallah, Bethlehem, Nablus, and Hebron next. That's their fear, and that's what they believe is on the way. And we now know, all pretty much with certainty, that if Israel moves to annex the West Bank, United States will support it, will not stand in the way. And all that, does not look good and will have a devastating impact on the schools. Now, as for U.S. aid, again, U.S. aid funding was cut. U.S. aid is being dismantled. And much of the amazing modern infrastructure of the Friends schools, upper and lower campus, have been funded by U.S. aid grants since 1997. Your own Retha McCutcheon and her brother were responsible for the first of those grants to build a new science building at the upper campus. That was our first work trip, 1997, with Guilford students to do the landscaping around the new science building built with USAID money. USAID money has put on the solar panels at the upper school and lower school that have saved the school $55,000 annually in energy costs. They have built the new assembly hall at the upper campus and the new middle school building, state-of-the-art computer systems, all funded by USAID money. And they had signed a contract for a little over $1 million to build a desperately needed assembly hall and recreational facility for the lower campus. For many years, USAID would not fund non-secondary school projects, but they finally were able to get money for the lower school, pre-K through 6. And they had started construction. They had spent $300,000 worth of construction. And then the new administration came in, USAID was cut. They had to dismiss the workers and start, the process of how do we raise the money to pay $300,000 that's already been expended and raise the money to complete the project. Fortunately, the courts ruled that if work was already done and contracts were signed, then you've got to legally at least pay for that. And so they are going to get the $300,000. Now, whether they'll get the rest of it, it's not clear, but they've started construction again. But it's had a devastating impact on so many people who are hired, worked for USAID projects. Same with UNRWA, which funds the refugee schools, health and human services for the refugees, and operates hospitals and schools. 6 Palestinian hospitals in Jerusalem, including the only Palestinian cancer hospital, lost their funding. So it's bad. Other questions before this 8-year-old soon to be comes screaming through the front door?
Yeah, we have one more.
I'm wondering what the attitude is of the Ramallah, the Christian Palestinians about the Hamas strategy to respond to the Israeli occupation and whatever.
Yeah. Thanks. It's varied. Everyone we talked to said that there was an initial burst after October 7 of sense of, wow, we did something. You know, we don't necessarily agree with the tactic, with what's happened. We deplore the loss of life, but we resisted. And they've not seen that kind of success, so if you want to call it that, for a long, long time. Now, one of our Palestinian friends answered your question this way just 2 weeks ago. Said, what I felt between midnight and 6 o'clock on October 7 was deep opposition to the 16-year-long siege of Gaza that Israel had imposed, that had caused terrible suffering in the Gaza Strip, as Israel had literally, in their words, put Gazans, 2.2 million Gazans, on a diet. They had calculated how many calories they could allow in of food to keep them from starving, but they called it putting them on a diet, and to have just enough calories to not starve. Said from midnight to 6 o'clock, I was opposed to that. From 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, when there was a breach of the fence and Gazans poured out of their open air prison in jubilation, I was ecstatic to see that kind of breach of the siege. From 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, I was appalled by a war crime of the killing of innocents, which was a war crime. From 9 o'clock until now, I am appalled by the war crime and the genocide occurring in Gaza. So that's kind of how they respond, that you have to put it in the context of a 16-year siege of Gaza, of Hamas representing the internationally allowed by law right to resist a military occupation by any means necessary. It doesn't sound good. That's Quakers. Most Palestinians say it's ineffective to fight, the fourth largest military in the world with stones and sticks and primitive rockets. But we have the right to resist. And many Palestinians, Muslim and Christian, have told us that there was an initial sense of ebullience, of excitement, that we've resisted. We actually successfully resisted. Then the sudden realization, 100% from everyone we've talked to, of, oh boy, buckle up. We know how they're going to respond. But they didn't anticipate it was going to be this devastating. They knew there'd be a response. There always has been what Israel calls a price tag. But they didn't realize it would be this, really a full-on genocide. Now, that said, we meet with Hamas leaders on occasion in the West Bank, where they don't have control. Fatah has control of the West Bank. But Fatah is a political party. I mean, Hamas, Fatah is too. And there are wings. There's the military wing. Much of Hamas, does education, social services in Gaza. That's most of what they do there. The reason there haven't been elections since 2006 is that Hamas knows that they're so unpopular in Gaza, they would have lost the election if it had been held. And Fatah knows that they were so unpopular in the West Bank, they would lose the election if it were held. In fact, we had Quaker friends in 2006 who, in Ramallah, voted for Hamas because they were seen as the party of reform, because Fatah, the Palestinian National Authority, was seen as too corrupt. So it's kind of like our politics in the United States. You kind of put a clothespin on your nose and vote for the folk you think are less corrupt than the other. I mean, it's just too many parallels. But yeah, it's complicated. Did that come anywhere close to answering your question?
Yeah. Well, Max, we want to respect your time and the fact that your grandchild is going to be rushing in. You've given us a window for us to peer into that I think we're going to be holding in the light and holding in contemplation and consideration this Holy Week.
Well, thank you so much. And thanks for this opportunity. What our friends over there tell us is just share the story. Share the story because they don't feel like they're heard. They look at the news sources that most people in the United States follow and say, that's not the story. And that's one of the reasons that we take people there and welcome anyone to go with us. We'd love to have you go. We have a group of about a dozen going in 2 months from today. We leave. Just let people see for themselves and to accompany the people doing the hard work. But what they all tell is just go back and tell the story of what you did see, what you heard, what you experienced. And indeed, continue to hold them in the light. Go to those websites, support those groups that are on both sides that are doing the hard work. And if you can, go yourself. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Max. And we're continuing to hold Jane and her friends in the light here as they travel and as they come home safely.
Thank you. She hopes she keeps dodging the missiles.
Oh, my goodness. Well, dear friend, thank you so much. Yeah, so good to see you, dear Max. And I hope that we can see you and talk to you again. And peace and light to you. All right. Much love.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you, old friends and new ones. Bye-bye.
Thanks, friends. Go in peace.